So the problem is, so therefore the problem is awareness and fear of people not knowing, so therefore you're fearful and therefore you don't do anything because you don't want to even think or deal with it. And that's why we're sharing Martin's story. Now, Martin, I want to cycle back to something else we discussed, and I'd like to talk about your doctor. And in my opinion, the irresponsible behavior of your other doctor was not making this a priority as part of your checkup to actually say, hey, you have to go and have a colonoscopy done. I mean, you're 60-something years old, so this should have been recommended to you since you were 50. So can you comment on that?
I can. And I have to tell you how disappointed I am in my doctor, totally disappointed. And here's why. I went to this particular doctor, because we were friends. We rode bikes together. We trained together for races. We've done races together. He has two brothers that are doctors, and we were just good friends. And I went to him, and every year he would say to me, Martin, you know, you need to get your PSA tested. And so I would go and get my PSA tested so that I could, my PSA test done so that I could avoid prostate cancer. That's one of the things that I always kind of worried about. You know, men get prostate cancer and they have an enlarged prostate. So that's something I was really concerned about, and he would always remind me of that. But one of the things, when I had this problem of going to the bathroom, he's the first person I contacted. And the response I got was a phone call, a voicemail message that said, go to this phone number, dial this number, enter in this code, and we'll give you the results. That's how warm and loving and caring my doctor was about me, that they gave me the results on the phone, on a recorded message. And then when I called the office and said, but I still have the problem, what do? I got a physician's assistant that said, well, I guess you need to find a specialist, and we don't have the name for you. Go find one. But basically, that's what it was. Now, since that time, remember I mentioned that the head of this bicycle club sent out an email to all of the members of this club. This person I'm talking about belongs to that same club. I've had people contact me and tell me that, and by email and by letter and by phone call, some have even taken me to lunch and said, man, I'm so glad you told me about this. I had no idea. This doctor, who is my friend, who belongs to the same training club that I did, the same cycling club, we've raced together, we've trained together, hasn't even bothered to say, Martin, I heard about this. I had no idea. Not only that, but my surgeon that I have now, my gastroenterologist, my radiologist, and my chemotherapist, 4 additional doctors that I'm working with now as a team, each one of them have contacted his office to get my medical records from him. And so it's not like he doesn't know what's going on. Now, I've ridden with this group enough times. Sometimes there's 40 guys go out in the mornings and ride their bikes for 37 or 40 miles, in the mornings. Now, I know what they talk about while they're sitting around waiting for the rest of the guys to show up. They talk about other people. And when this email went out, it made an impact on that group. And I know what they talk about because I've got friends who still ride with him. And this guy, my friend, my training partner, my fellow cyclist, my doctor, hasn't even bothered to say, I'm so sorry to hear about that. We need to get on top of this, or what can we do to get on top of this? Now, I want you to stop and think about something for a minute. If something were to happen to me, and my wife loses her husband of 38 years, and her companion for 40, we've known each other for 2 years, and then we've married for 38 years, my children lose their father, my grandchildren, 26 of my grandchildren, lose their grandfather, and my wife decides to sue this doctor. What do you think about what happened here? Does that doctor have a legal obligation to come back to me and say, or to me and say, Martin, you're 50 years old, you need to get these 5 tests done, or 3 tests or whatever, because you're 50. Oh, by the way, you just turned 60, you need to get these tests done. In other words, there are some benchmark years along the way that certain tests need to be done, or should be done. Does he have a legal obligation to come back and tell me that? Well, maybe not. Maybe he does, maybe not. I don't know. He's my medical professional. He's somebody I hired to help me, to keep me aware of medical things that are going on in my life and when benchmark dates might come up and some things that I might need to do. First of all, if he doesn't notify me of those, he's losing some money, because those are some tests that he might be able to perform himself and make some money on them. Or he could refer me to somebody else, and then he would get a kickback or some type of a referral fee from them. So he's losing money. He could very well end up losing a patient, and he could end up in a very severe lawsuit. Now, even if my survivors don't win, he loses as well. Suppose they sue him, and it comes back and says, well, he didn't really have, a moral obligation. Yeah, he probably should have done something, but legally, no, not really. He still has attorney's fees he's going to have to pay, and an attorney will pick this case up and run with it in a heartbeat, because they know doctors have medical malpractice insurance, which may or may not cover it, but they're perceived to have deep pockets. So an attorney would pick this up and run with it. Now, even if it goes to court or there's a lawsuit, it's not going to stay between my wife and my doctor and the two attorneys, right? It's going to go everywhere, and the reason it's going to go everywhere is because she's not going to want to have other people go through the situation that I'm going through and that their families are going through. So she would feel an obligation to tell as many people as she could possibly do. Now, he's going to have some huge attorney's fees, but he's also going to have a reputation issue and probably some loss of patients and maybe even a sanction before the medical board, or at least a hearing of some kind. Mm-hmm. Why would you, if you were a doctor, put yourself in that situation? Now, if you're a business owner, or maybe you're not a business owner, but you know that you're a customer from a business, if there's a problem with a customer, there's a dispute, there's a dissatisfied customer, there's something that's going on, what's the very best thing you could do? Get on the phone and call that person and figure out what could we do to solve that problem, to minimize it, to make it go away, to whatever it is, to help that person become more satisfied so that the bad news doesn't travel. We help that person, and many times when we help a person overcome a negative situation, that person becomes a stronger customer than they were ever before, and they will now tell other people about the good experience that they had rather than telling people about the bad experience that they had. And they're going to tell more people about a bad experience than they are about a good experience. But this
and
doctor
Martin, what I'm hearing from you?
What?
What I'm hearing from you is that your feeling is that he really didn't care, a simple 4-letter word. He didn't care enough to reach out to you, care enough to recommend that you get the screening done, and just care enough to be concerned. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, you're right. And if you want to take care and break this down, customers are really everything. C-A-R-E, and they really are. And they are everything. They're your financial security.
Wait a minute. We just had a teaching moment. I don't want to miss that. CARE stands for what?
Customers are really everything.
Customers are really everything. CARE.
They're everything you own. See, everything you own, Marlene, is provided to you by somebody that you have served. Now, you're the person, if you have a regular job, the person that you work for, you provide them a service. They're your customer. You are providing a service for that customer, and they are paying you. Everything you own is given to you by someone else. Your customers are really everything. They're your food that you eat, they're the house that you live in, they're the cars that you drive. They're responsible for the vacations you take, for the educations you give your children. They're responsible for the retirement funds that you have at the end of your career. They're responsible for everything you do, everything you own, everything you enjoy, and how you take care of those customers, even if it's just an employer, how you take care of that employer who is your customer, that's going to give you the rewards that you're looking for in life. So they really are everything. And if you don't take care of your customers, you end up losing your customers. That affects every area of your life.
Wow. So everybody just got a taste of the business mentor side of Martin. Always teaching something. Had to slip that in. Okay, that's awesome. I love that. I will never forget that. Thank you. So, yeah, he didn't care. He didn't care at all. So any doctors listening to this, if you don't have this on your little checklist of things to recommend to people, I beg you to, because this is what...
Marlene, here's how easy it is. You set a particular file, and with computers today, it's so easy. You plug everybody's birth date in, and when they hit certain benchmark dates, then it triggers something. It either sends an email, it sends a letter, it sends a postcard, or it triggers you to make a phone call. In other words, somehow connect with that person and say, you're 50, here are 3 things you should do, or 5 things you should do, and here's the steps that we need to do, and here's who you call to make an appointment, blah, blah, blah. What you do is just itemize the thing down. Now, if you put that in front of them and they don't take action, you've done your part. It's up to them now because they didn't take action. They can never come back to you and say, well, they didn't tell me about that. Remember, they're a healthcare professional. See, in insurance world, if your insurance agent calls you and says, Marlene, we know that you have a daughter who just turned 16 about 2 months ago. If she has her license, we probably ought to get her added to the policy so she doesn't get out there and have an accident and you have no coverage on it. Now, do they have a legal obligation to do that? Well, maybe not. Is it good business? Yeah, it really is. And here's why. Insurance agents have what they call errors and omissions policy, E&O policies, that covers you for errors that you make or omissions, things that you leave out. If there was an accident and you weren't aware that you had to get your daughter on it because you thought, well, maybe she's automatically covered, and you decide to sue that agent, you can go under their errors and omissions policy, and maybe it will cover them, and because it was an omission, or maybe it wouldn't cover them. In any case, they've got a major problem because they're going to have lawsuits, they're going to have attorney's fees, they're going to have loss of reputation, and this thing may spread all over the place. They may have loss of customers. They may get sanctioned by their company or by the insurance department or whatever. It's not that different from a medical professional. You hire these people who are trained experts in what they do, and if they don't tell you about these kinds of things, maybe there's not a legal obligation there. But why would you take a chance? But even so, that's from the legal aspect. Let's take a look at it from just a humanistic point of view. Mm-hmm. Would you really want to be responsible if you knew you had something that could be of benefit to your customer or your patient or your prospect, and you didn't share that with them? Would you want to, or have that on your conscience that, if I would have only told them about that, I could have prevented this? See, if this doctor is any kind of a person at all, he'll be thinking to himself, if I would have only told Martin about that test, if I only done that, he wouldn't be going through this thing. We could still be training together. We could still be racing together. His family wouldn't have to go through what they're going through. His kids and his grandkids wouldn't have to be worried about losing dad or grandpa. If I would have just said that about him. But here's what I think. I think he's sitting back. I don't know this, but it's the only perception I can come up with, because he didn't care enough to pick up the phone and call me or find out a little bit about me or follow up on the 2 negative tests that I had and say, well, Martin, those tests didn't reveal anything, but you obviously have a problem. Why don't we take it to another level and see what we need to do? We need to refer you to a gastroenterologist, to a specialist. Because he didn't do that and because he hasn't responded since then, I can only assume that he's trying to hide from the situation hoping it'll go away. Right. It's not going to go away.